The courtroom was colder than she expected. Lieutenant Commander Maya Torres could feel the chill rising through the floor as she was forced to her knees. The marble tiles pressed against her cheek. Her military medals clinked softly, a cruel reminder of everything she'd once earned. The bailiff's voice barked, "Stay down, Torres!" Judge Robert Hayes sat high above, face like stone. No flicker of emotion, no hint of justice. Across the room, the prosecutor, Linda Cross, watched with a thin smile, the kind that didn't belong in a place meant for truth. Traitor. Someone hissed from the gallery. Spy. Another voice joined in. The whispers grew like a storm swelling in a closed room. Security Officer Reed, a thick man with a sneer that never faded, pressed his boot against her ankle. "Stay where you belong," he muttered. But Maya didn't flinch. Her eyes burned with quiet fire. Every second she was watching, counting, calculating. Then the doors slammed open. The sound silenced everything. Every head turned as a man in full uniform strode in. Admiral Jonah Reed, 4 silver stars catching the courtroom lights. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Even the judge's hand paused above the gavel. Why was an admiral here, and why now? Before the chaos began, that morning had felt almost normal. Maya had arrived in plain clothes, the same way she'd done for every court appearance since the charges dropped. The media waited like vultures, cameras flashing, shouting her name. "Lieutenant Commander Torres, did you leak classified data? Are you a traitor to your country?" She didn't respond. She never did. Her mother's words echoed in her head. Silence speaks louder than anger. The security line inside the courthouse moved slowly. When it was her turn, the guard waved the scanner twice over her body, again and again, as though she was invisible until proven otherwise. A white man in a suit walked through just after her, barely checked. "Standard procedure," the guard said without looking at her. Maya kept her face calm, her eyes moving, counting cameras, exits, guards. Every small detail stored. That's what her SEAL training had taught her. Observe everything. Miss nothing. Judge Hayes's courtroom was infamous. His record? Maximum sentences for anyone in uniform who disobeyed authority. And standing across from him, Linda Cross, his old colleague from the military prosecution office. A perfect match. Her court-appointed lawyer, Evan Blake, leaned in and whispered, "They've set this up. Cross and Hayes used to work together. Every case like yours ends badly." Maya didn't answer. She just adjusted her cuffs, straightened her back, and waited for the performance to begin. When the judge entered, the bailiff shouted, "All rise." The room obeyed. Everyone but Maya felt the weight of the silence differently. Some feared it, others relished it. Then Cross began. "Lieutenant Commander Torres betrayed her country," she said. "She shared intelligence with foreign agents. She endangered American lives." Every word was sharp and deliberate, and every word was wrong. Cross lifted a stack of papers like a magician showing her final trick. "Exhibit A, Your Honor. Emails, timestamps, evidence, fabricated evidence." Maya's jaw tightened as she examined the papers. The dates didn't match. The formatting was off. Even the sender's digital tags were inconsistent with real transmissions. Someone had built this entire case from lies. But the courtroom wasn't a place for truth today. It was theater. Cross knew her lines well.
"The defendant violated sacred trust," she declared.
She chose betrayal over loyalty. In the back row, 3 men sat perfectly still, suits too dark, eyes too sharp. They weren't reporters. They weren't observers. They were watching her. Who were they? Maya kept her breathing steady, remembering her training. Assess, don't react. But one of the men met her gaze for a split second. He didn't look away, and that told her everything she needed to know. The courtroom air grew heavier as the hours dragged on. Every question from the prosecutor was a weapon disguised as logic. Every objection from her lawyer dismissed before it reached the judge's lips. Maya sat motionless, her wrists resting on the cold wood of the defendant's table. She listened to the rhythm of the lies being told about her, each one layered with the kind of confidence that only comes from coordination. The next blow came from the prosecutor's assistant. "We have additional evidence, Your Honor." A flash drive appeared, held high like a trophy. Cross smiled. "This contains encrypted communications between the defendant and a foreign journalist." Evan rose. "Your Honor, we were never given this evidence during discovery." Judge Hayes didn't even look at him. Overruled. He waved his hand like someone brushing away a fly. Maya leaned forward. Those aren't mine. The metadata doesn't match the mission timeline. The gavel slammed. You will speak only when instructed, the judge thundered. The bailiff moved closer, hand resting on his taser. Need me to restrain her, Your Honor? Maya looked up, her expression calm. But behind her eyes, something had shifted. She was memorizing everything, every glance, every gesture, every small detail that might one day prove who was truly pulling the strings. Her lawyer leaned toward her. Maya, please don't provoke them. She whispered back, I'm not provoking anyone. I'm observing. The prosecutor began displaying photos on the screen. Images of Maya in full combat gear, her SEAL team behind her, cross-paced slowly as the pictures flickered. You were the only woman in your unit, weren't you, Commander? That must have been difficult. Maybe even motivated your actions? Evan stood instantly. Objection. Relevance. I'm establishing motive, Cross replied sweetly. The judge nodded. Proceed. Maya's jaw clenched. Her posture didn't change, but her silence spoke volumes. Cross continued, waving a stack of performance reviews. Difficulty following orders. Questioning mission parameters. A pattern of behavior, wouldn't you say? They called it insubordination, Maya replied evenly. But those were tactical corrections that saved lives. The prosecutor's smirk faltered for a second. Just a second. Then came the command. Stand up, Lieutenant Commander. Maya obeyed, shoulders straight, head high. Show the court your hands. The room fell silent. She raised her calloused palm, steady as stone. These are the hands of a sniper, Cross announced. Hands that have taken lives. Hands that type secrets meant for our enemies. The words hung in the air like a noose. Officer Reed stepped closer again, the same sneer curving his mouth. For everyone's safety, I recommend restraints. Evan objected. Your Honor, this is unnecessary. But Hayes didn't hesitate. Approved. The sound of plastic restraints slicing through the quiet cut deeper than any insult. Reed yanked her wrists behind her back, tightening the zip ties until her skin burned. He leaned close, voice low and bitter. Not so invincible now, are you? The audience watched like spectators at an execution. Some looked away. Others didn't blink. Maya sat again, bound and silent as the proceedings continued. But inside her mind, a plan was forming. Every detail of the room was a map. Every door, every uniform, every face. She was still in control. When the recess was called, they took her to a small holding room. The lights buzzed overhead. No windows, one door, 2 cameras. Her wrists were raw, but she breathed steadily. 4 counts in, hold, 6 counts out. Her SEAL training was more than combat, it was control. She closed her eyes and let her mind replay everything that had happened. The tone in the prosecutor's voice. The tension in Reed's hands. The small, sharp glances exchanged between the judge and the woman accusing her. Something wasn't right. When Reed returned to the holding room, scrolling through his phone, she noticed a flash of text on his screen. It was only visible for a second, but her trained eyes caught every word. Make sure she goes down today. Judge is on board. That one glimpse was all she needed. Reed leaned against the wall. Comfortable, Commander? She didn't answer. He chuckled. Didn't think so. He didn't realize that every second he spent talking gave her more time. As soon as he left, she began testing the zip ties, twisting her wrists gently, feeling for the weak point. Slowly, they gave way. Enough for her to move her fingers freely. In the heel of her boot, she found the hidden compartment, a habit from missions where backup plans meant survival. Inside, a small device, an emergency beacon with encrypted text capabilities. She typed a single message. Falcon compromised. Evidence planted. Then she added her code signature and hit send. The beacon vibrated once. Message delivered. Her breathing slowed again. The plan was in motion. Moments later, Evan entered, looking pale and worn. They're not going to give you a fair trial, he said quietly. The judge is biased, but if I challenge him, it'll only make things worse. I need you to do exactly what I say when we go back, she whispered. He frowned. Maya, what are you planning? Just trust me, she said. He hesitated, then nodded. All right, I'll follow your lead. The hallway outside echoed with footsteps. Reed's voice barked orders to the guards. Something in his tone had changed. Agitated, nervous. Maya smiled faintly. The message had reached someone important. The game was no longer one-sided. When she returned to the courtroom, the air had shifted. The crowd was restless. 3 new men now sat at the back in dark uniforms. Military, silent, watching. And Maya Torres was ready for whatever came next. The judge's gavel struck again, and the noise rippled through the room like a gunshot. People straightened in their seats. Cameras clicked. The faint hum of tension grew louder, vibrating beneath every breath. Prosecutor Cross stood again, heels echoing on the floor as she addressed the court. The prosecution calls our next witness, intelligence analyst Peter Vance with the Defense Communications Bureau. A tall man stepped forward. His hair was neat, his expression perfectly confident. He looked like the kind of person used to being believed. He adjusted his glasses, greeted the judge, and began to speak in a calm, measured tone. "I have reviewed the communications records related to the defendant," he said. "They contain sensitive data transmissions that directly endangered military personnel." Maya watched him carefully. His voice was smooth, too smooth, the kind of practiced confidence that belongs to someone reciting a script. Evan leaned toward her. "You think he's lying?" She whispered back, "I know he's lying. He used an encryption term that hasn't existed for years." "Permission to cross-examine," Evan said, rising. The judge nodded. "Mr. Vance," Evan began, adjusting his notes. "You mentioned the Z-47 encryption sequence. Could you explain how it interacts with modern satellite data routing?" The analyst blinked. "That information is classified." "But you used it as the basis of your accusation," Evan pressed. "Surely you understand what you're talking about." A murmur rippled through the room. Vance looked toward the prosecutor, searching for help. Cross stood stiffly, her smile beginning to crack. Evan continued, his confidence growing. "One more question. When was this system deployed?" 3 years ago during the Persian Coast operations," Vance replied quickly. Evan allowed a small pause before saying, "That's interesting, because that system doesn't exist." The silence that followed was deafening. Judge Hayes shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Cross opened her mouth to object, but the sound of static from Officer Reed's radio interrupted her. Reed stepped aside, listening intently to a voice that no one else could hear. His jaw clenched. He whispered something to another officer near the exit. 2 additional guards entered the courtroom and quietly positioned themselves near the doors. The audience began murmuring. Even the judge looked unsettled. "Officer Reed, what's happening?" "Routine security update, Your Honor," Reed replied, though his tone carried no conviction. Maya sat still, watching it all unfold. Her beacon had reached someone. She could feel it. The shift in the air was the first confirmation. Cross pretended not to notice the commotion and gestured toward the next witness. "Captain Thomas Hale, please approach the stand." A man in a crisp Navy uniform entered. The medals on his chest glimmered like armor. He stood tall, saluting with exaggerated precision before taking the oath. Cross smiled again. "Captain Hale, please describe your working relationship with the defendant." "I was her commanding officer during Operation Sandstorm," he said, his tone clipped, mechanical. "At first she performed admirably, but later she became unpredictable. She questioned orders, accessed files above her clearance level, and compromised mission integrity." "Would you say she was a liability?" "Yes," he replied without hesitation. Evan stood. "Your Honor, the captain's service record doesn't align with the defendant's timeline of deployment. He couldn't have been her commanding officer." "Objection," Cross snapped. "Defense is misleading the court." "Sustained," Judge Hayes said instantly. Maya watched Hale's posture. His uniform fit perfectly, but it was too perfect. Like a costume, not clothing earned through years of wear. She noticed the misplaced ribbon order on his chest. The kind of mistake no real officer would ever make. Evan leaned closer to whisper, "He's fake." "I know," Maya said softly. "And someone's about to panic." A sudden commotion echoed from the hallway outside. Raised voices. Then the thud of heavy boots. Reed's radio blared again. His face went pale. "Judge, we may need to clear the building." The judge looked alarmed now. "What is going on?" Before anyone could answer, the courtroom doors burst open. 3 uniformed men entered, their movements sharp and synchronized. The insignias on their sleeves carried weight. Naval intelligence. The gallery gasped. The lead officer stepped forward. "Your Honor, we are placing Officer Thomas Reed under arrest for obstruction of justice and tampering with federal evidence." Reed's hand flew to his weapon, but he froze as two agents raised theirs in response. His face drained of color. "Lieutenant Commander Torres," the officer continued, "please remain seated. You're safe now." The prosecutor turned white. "What is this?" "National security intervention," the lead officer said coldly. "On direct order from Admiral Jonah Reed, Director of Naval Intelligence." The name hit the room like a thunderclap. The same man who had walked in earlier now stepped forward through the entrance. 4 shining stars on his shoulders, gaze like steel. The judge stammered. "Admiral, this is highly irregular." "You've made a mockery of justice, Judge Hayes," the Admiral interrupted. "And you're done." Chaos erupted. Guards shouted. Reporters scrambled for cameras. The Admiral raised his voice once more. "Officer Reed, Prosecutor Cross, and Captain Hale, you are all under investigation for conspiracy against the United States government." Gasps filled the air. Maya closed her eyes briefly. For the first time since her arrest, she allowed herself a quiet breath. Her message had reached the right hands, and the game had finally changed. The noise in the courtroom turned into a storm of disbelief. People were shouting, chairs scraping, papers falling to the ground. Judge Hayes struck his gavel again and again, but no one was listening. The authority he'd held for years was dissolving before his eyes. Admiral Jonah Reed stepped closer to the bench, his boots echoing against the marble. Every movement was deliberate, commanding. "This court is now under the jurisdiction of Naval Intelligence," he announced. Effective immediately, the 6 agents behind him moved with precision, separating the accused. Officer Reed was disarmed and handcuffed within seconds. His smirk had vanished. Prosecutor Cross's papers scattered across the floor as an agent seized her phone and briefcase. Judge Hayes's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "You have no right to barge into my courtroom like this." The Admiral's gaze didn't waver. "You have no right to hide behind your robe while betraying your oath. We have records of offshore deposits linked to national security leaks. This trial was a cover operation to silence one of our own." The words hit like a wave. Reporters gasped. Guards exchanged panicked looks, and the crowd rippled with confusion. Admiral Reed turned toward Maya. "Lieutenant Commander Torres, you are hereby reinstated to active duty." "You've done your job." Her restraints were cut. The tightness around her wrists loosened, the burning fading into dull relief. She stood slowly, feeling the weight of the moment press against her. Every camera was pointed at her now. Every whisper carried her name. But she didn't speak. She simply looked around the room, the judge, the prosecutor, the fake officer, and memorized their faces one last time. The Admiral addressed the room again. "For the record, Lieutenant Commander Torres was operating under an authorized intelligence directive. Operation Sentinel was designed to expose corruption within the judicial military pipeline. And it worked." Cross shook her head furiously. "This is absurd. Those files were real. The emails, the photos, they were all real." Maya finally spoke, her voice calm and even. "They were manufactured by you and your contacts, and you were too arrogant to notice the errors. Wrong timestamps, broken chains, recycled metadata. You didn't even bother to check the encryption origin." Cross's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The Admiral nodded toward the agents. "Take them." Within moments, Cross, Reed, and the imposter officer were led away in restraints. Judge Hayes stood frozen, pale, watching as his carefully built world crumbled. An agent handed the Admiral a small device. Maya recognized it instantly, her emergency beacon. "This transmitted 37 minutes ago," the Admiral said. "That's what triggered our operation." The courtroom was now unrecognizable. Uniformed agents moved in and out, sealing the doors, tagging evidence, taking statements. The crowd had thinned to silence. Maya stood near the defense table, the same place she had been humiliated hours earlier. She looked down at the broken restraints on the floor and exhaled slowly. The Admiral approached her. "You've been under for 18 months, Lieutenant Commander." "It's over now," she nodded. "Not yet. We've pulled a few threads, but the web goes deeper. These weren't the ones in charge." He studied her for a long moment. "Then we keep digging." Outside, the courthouse steps were swarmed by media vans and flashing lights. The public didn't know the half of it, only that something extraordinary had unfolded behind those closed doors. By the time the sun began to set, the courthouse was no longer a place of justice. It was a crime scene. Yellow tape wrapped around its pillars, guards posted at every entrance. Inside, rooms once filled with whispers and judgment were now filled with evidence bags and recorded confessions. The corridors echoed with new voices: agents, analysts, investigators. Maya walked beside the Admiral down one of those halls. Screens had been set up in a makeshift command post displaying documents, encrypted communications, and bank records. He gestured toward the data wall. Your instincts were right. The network used the justice system as camouflage. Judges, prosecutors, security officers, they were part of something larger. Maya studied the map connecting lines between agencies, departments, and offshore accounts. Her voice was steady but laced with quiet anger. They used people's trust as a weapon. They discredited anyone who questioned them, especially those who didn't fit their image of what loyalty should look like. Women, minorities, whistleblowers, the Admiral said grimly. They picked targets no one would believe. Maya's eyes flicked to a folder labeled prior cases. Names of soldiers and officers filled the list, people silenced before they could defend themselves. We'll clear every one of them, she said. Every name on that list gets justice, the Admiral nodded. You've earned some rest, Commander. Later, she replied quietly. There's still too much to do. From another room came the faint sound of someone shouting. Judge Hayes was being questioned by federal investigators. His defiance had given way to desperation. I didn't know, he was yelling. I just followed procedure. Maya paused at the doorway, watching him. That's what they all say, she murmured. Then she turned away, her expression unreadable, and walked back toward the operations room. There was still truth left to uncover, and she was nowhere near finished. Night fell over the city, but the courthouse was alive with noise. The hum of servers, the murmur of agents comparing notes, the low rumble of printers spitting out newly decrypted files. Every minute brought more revelations, each one darker than the last. Maya stood before a glowing screen that displayed dozens of connected names, each one tied to another by lines of red and yellow. The network wasn't small. It stretched across agencies, across continents. An analyst approached, holding a tablet. We've confirmed 27 active participants. 15 more under review. The Admiral nodded grimly. This runs deeper than we thought. Maya's attention stayed fixed on one name at the top of the chart. Deputy Secretary Alan Brooks. A man known for his patriotism, his speeches about loyalty and sacrifice. The kind of man people never questioned. Brooks? She asked quietly. He's one of them? The analyst nodded. Money trails linked directly to his foundation accounts. Offshore deposits timed with intelligence breaches. The Admiral's voice was low but steady. We'll need proof before we move on someone that high up. Maya folded her arms, mind racing. Then let's get it. They used every rule to bury me. Now I'll use every rule to uncover them. Across the building, the once powerful stood in interrogation rooms that smelled faintly of bleach and fear. Officer Reed sat with his head bowed, a shell of the man who'd strutted through the courtroom hours before. His lawyer whispered urgently, but Reed's lips barely moved. In another room, Prosecutor Cross stared blankly at the table in front of her. The confidence that once defined her had dissolved into quiet panic. A recording device blinked red beside her. The agent questioning her spoke with measured calm. We have messages between you and Reed before the trial began. Discussions about ensuring Lieutenant Commander Torres would go down without appeal. What do you have to say? Cross rubbed her temples. I was told the evidence came from the Defense Bureau. I was told to make the case airtight. I didn't know it was fabricated. You didn't want to know, the agent replied. That's not ignorance. That's convenience. The door opened. The Admiral stepped inside. His presence silenced the room instantly. Ms. Cross, the time for excuses is over. You'll cooperate or you'll spend the rest of your life explaining to a military tribunal why you sabotaged an American officer's career. Maya passed by the window of that room, her reflection merging with Cross's inside the glass. For a moment, the two women, one accused, one accuser, existed side by side in silence. Then Maya turned away. Hours later, in the command post, a new alert flashed across the main monitor. An encrypted message had been intercepted from one of Brooks's known associates. The sender was trying to delete archives remotely from a government server. Trace it, Maya ordered. The analysts worked fast. Code scrolled down the screen, lines of numbers blurring together. Signal origin located, one said. Department of Defense subnet. Source, Classified administrative terminal. The Admiral exhaled sharply. He's panicking. Maya stepped closer to the screen. If he's deleting files, then he's scared. Which means he knows we're close. The next day, the investigation spread beyond the courthouse. FBI teams raided safe houses and offices. Military police secured 3 bases tied to compromised intelligence channels. Each location turned up stacks of encrypted drives, false identities, and bank ledgers. At noon, Maya briefed a room filled with senior officials. The walls buzzed with tension.
They used gaps between military and civilian systems to move information, she explained.
Each department believed someone else was responsible for oversight. That's how the network survived for so long. One of the officials leaned forward. And you believe Brooks directed all of this? Maya's gaze was steady. He funded the channels, approved the appointments, and covered the leaks. Yes. The Admiral folded his hands. We'll need confirmation before going public. We'll get it, Maya said. That evening, she walked alone through the quiet courthouse. The place where they'd tried to destroy her now carried the faint echo of her victory. She paused in the same holding room where she had sent her beacon, tracing the marks on her wrists left by the restraints. The door opened behind her. It was the Admiral. You've done good work, he said. But this next step will be different, political. Loud. I'm ready, she replied. He studied her for a moment, then handed her a sealed folder. Tomorrow you'll testify before the Congressional Committee. They need to hear the full scope, how it happened and how we stop it from happening again. Maya looked at the folder, then at him. What happens to Brooks? We're moving on him quietly tonight. He won't see it coming. She nodded once, determination hardening in her expression. As she left the courthouse, the air outside felt lighter. She walked down the steps without the weight of accusation pressing against her chest. But she knew this wasn't the end. The truth had only begun to surface. Somewhere above the city, men like Brooks were already trying to bury it again. And Maya Torres was not the kind of woman to let them. The morning sunlight glared off the marble pillars of the Capitol as Maya climbed the steps, her uniform immaculate, her medals gleaming like quiet defiance. The air buzzed with anticipation. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions that she ignored. Inside, the great chamber was already filled. Senators, military brass, analysts, journalists, all waiting to hear from the woman who had exposed one of the most dangerous conspiracies in recent history. When she entered, the room fell still. Every eye turned to her. She walked to the witness table, laid her folder down, and took the oath with a steady voice. The committee chair leaned forward. Commander Torres, thank you for your service. Tell us in your own words how this all began. She spoke simply, clearly, without theatrics. It began when questions were treated as threats. When honesty became disloyalty. When people like me, people who noticed patterns, were silenced instead of heard. Her words hung in the chamber, heavy and real. She explained everything. The forged evidence, the complicit judges, the network that traded secrets for money. She described how the conspiracy thrived in the shadows of bureaucracy. How good men and women were destroyed to protect corruption. Her tone never broke, but emotion flickered beneath every syllable. The senators listened in silence, their pens unmoving. When she finished, one finally spoke. Commander, do you believe this was the work of a few bad actors or a systemic failure? Both, she answered. Systems protect themselves. People abuse that protection. The result is the same, innocent lives ruined. Another senator leaned forward. And what would you recommend? Maya opened her folder and displayed a set of documents. 12 reforms, she said. Independent oversight for intelligence-related trials. Cross-department transparency. Mandatory bias audits in military justice. And a whistleblower protection division within the Department of Defense. A low murmur spread through the room. The committee chair nodded gravely. You've given us much to consider. When the hearing ended, applause broke out. Not the polite kind, but the raw, grateful kind that fills a room with something close to hope. Outside reporters called her name again, but she walked past them without stopping. She had no interest in fame, only closure. Later that week, she stood in a secure briefing room with Admiral Reed and the Director of National Intelligence. Evidence now covered the walls. Intercepted messages, transaction trails, arrest photos. It's done, the Admiral said. Brooks confessed, and he named names. How many? She asked. More than we expected. The rot reached higher than anyone believed. Maya folded her arms, staring at the faces on the wall. Then we rebuild stronger. The director nodded. That's already happening. Congress just approved the Intelligence Integrity Act. You're being appointed as lead advisor for its implementation. Maya exhaled slowly, part relief, part disbelief. After everything, they still trust me? They don't just trust you, the Admiral said. They need you. A month later, under a clear spring sky, Maya stood at the Naval Academy's graduation ceremony. The crowd stretched across the parade grounds, hundreds of cadets in crisp uniforms. She stepped up to the podium as the music faded. You've trained for combat, she told them, her voice carrying over the sea of faces. But the hardest battles aren't always on the battlefield. Sometimes they're inside the systems you serve. Sometimes the enemy wears a badge or a title. The crowd was silent, listening. Courage isn't just pulling a trigger or storming a wall. It's speaking when silence feels safer. It's holding the line when truth puts a target on your back. Remember that. When she finished, the cadets rose to their feet, the sound of their applause rolling like thunder. After the ceremony, a group of young women approached her, their faces alight with admiration. Commander Torres, one asked, do you think it'll be easier for us now? Maya smiled faintly. No, but it'll be fairer. And fairness is a good place to start. That evening, she sat on a quiet bench overlooking the bay. The sun dipped low, painting the water gold. Admiral Reed joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. You've changed more than a courtroom, he said. You've changed the way justice itself is seen. She sipped the coffee, eyes on the horizon. Justice isn't perfect. It just needs people who refuse to stop chasing it. The Admiral nodded. We call it the Torres Standard now. Trust, verify, and never surrender the truth. She smiled at that. I didn't do it alone. No, he agreed softly. But you were the one who stood first. For a long moment they sat in silence, the wind carrying the scent of salt and freedom. When she finally rose to leave, the Admiral handed her a sealed folder. New assignment, he said. International liaison. Other nations want to learn from what you built here. She took the folder but didn't open it. Tomorrow, she said. Tonight I just want to breathe. As she walked away, the fading light caught the silver star on her chest. The waves broke softly against the pier, steady and endless like the truth she had fought to uncover. The world had tried to silence her once. Now it would echo her name in every place where justice dared to wake again.